Hello, I'm Julia Su. Today, I'm presenting the study on sequential mapping from ICD-10-CM to ICD-11. This study was conducted with my colleagues Dr. King-Wang Fang and Dr. Oliver Bodenreiter at NLM. We will talk about the introduction, method, results, discussion, and conclusions. WHO adopted the ICD-11 in May 2019. ICD-11 is expected to be implemented by member countries starting in January 2022. As a WHO member country, the United States is required to report mortality statistics using ICD-11. For morbidity, the United States started using ICD-10-CM since 2015. That is 16 years after ICD-10 was released for mortality reporting. So there will likely be a considerable delay before ICD-11 is used for morbidity coding in United States. In other words, ICD-10-CM and ICD-11 will coexist for a significant period of time. A map between ICD-10-CM and ICD-11 will support interoperability among datasets coded with these two standards. The objective of this study is to explore novel approaches to automatically derive a map between ICD-10-CM and ICD-11 through the sequential use of existing maps. We use the three existing publicly available maps. The first one is SNOMED-CT to ICD-10-CM map. We call it NLM map. It is a rule-based map published by NLM to support semi-automated generation of ICD-10-CM codes from clinical data encoded in SNOMED-CT. The second one is ICD-10 to ICD-11 map. We call it the WHO map. It is published by WHO and included in the ICD-11 implementation package. The third one is SNOMED-CT to ICD-11 map. We call it the SI map. This is a prototype map published by SNOMED International using automated mapping algorithm. Method. In method 1, the original direction of NLM map was from SNOMED-CT to ICD-10-CM. We use this map in the reverse direction to reach SNOMED code from ICD-10-CM. We then use the SI map to map from SNOMED-CT to ICD-11. In method 2, we first converted ICD-10-CM codes to ICD-10 codes, then used the WHO map to map from ICD-10 to ICD-11. Code conversion was done by truncating an ICD-10-CM code to arrive at a ICD-10 code that was included in the WHO map. The ICD-10 codes could be a leaf code or a higher level code. To evaluate these two methods, we used a reference standard that was created in the previous study. That the reference standard involved 943 commonly used ICD-10-CM codes. These codes represent 60% of usage in large claims and hospital datasets. For results, we will take a look at the overall performance, overall mapping performance, and the failure analysis. The overall mapping performance. In the NLM map, sometimes a SNOMED concept was mapped to the multiple ICD-10-CM codes. Each ICD-10-CM code was put into a map group. Usually, map group 1 had the most relevant code. For method 1, if we only use map group 1, the coverage dropped slightly, but the F1 score was better. Similarly, for method 2, using the one category map gave better F1 score with a slightly lower coverage. Among the combination method, the union of method 1 and method 2, for the union and intersection, in method 1, we only use the map group 1. In method 2, we only use the one category map. So you can see that the union of method 1 and method 2 had better coverage and F1 score compared to the intersection. Failure analysis for method 1. We reviewed all cases where the ICD-11 target found was different from the reference standard. About 79% of the incorrect map records are due to problem in the first steps of the sequential map. There are several different types of problems. First one is ICD-10-CM codes mapped to an overly specific SNOMED CT concept. For example, ICD-10-CM code J44.9, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease unspecified. This code was mapped to the more specific SNOMED concept, obliterative bronchiolitis, through the NLM map. Then this SNOMED concept was mapped to ICD-11 code CE26.0, chronic obliterative bronchiolitis. However, the correct ICD-11 target for the 10-CM code J44.9 should be CE22.Z, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease unspecified. The second type is ICD-10-CM code mapped to overly broad SNOMED concept. For example, the ICD-10-CM code F32.9, major depressive disorder, single episode unspecified. This code was mapped to SNOMED CT concept, depressive disorder. The SNOMED concept then was mapped to ICD-11 code 6A7Z, depressive disorder unspecified. As a result, the more appropriate ICD-11 target, 6A70.3, single episode depressive disorder severe without psychiatric symptoms, this code was missed. About 20% of the incorrect map record are due to problems in the second step of the sequential map. For example, SNOMED concept, squamous cell carcinoma of right lung. This concept was incorrectly mapped to the ICD-11 code 2B60.1, squamous cell carcinoma of lip in SI map. In 4 cases, the error actually was in the reference standards. For example, the ICD-10-CM code C18.7, malignant neoplasm of sigmoid column, was mapped to the ICD-11 code 2B90.3, malignant neoplasm of sigmoid column, which this code was a high-level code, is a non-leaf code, is not valid for coding. So instead, the descendant code 2B90.3Z, malignant neoplasm of sigmoid column unspecified, this code should be used. Failure analysis for method 2. As you can see, about half of the incorrect map record are due to problems in the first step of the sequential map. The other half are due to issues in step 2. Due to the incomplete coverage of WHO map for ICD-10 codes, in order to reach a target ICD-11 code, sometimes we had to select an ICD-10 code that was a parent of a valid ICD-10 code. We call this code roll-up. This caused some failure cases. For example, the ICD-10-CM code R35.0 frequency of maturation was rolled up to R35 polyuria. In the WHO map, R35 was mapped to the ICD-11 code MF55 polyuria. Actually, the correct ICD-11 target for the ICD-10-CM code R35.0 should be MF50.0, frequent micturition. About 49% maps failed due to errors in the WHO maps. For example, the ICD-10 code's K59.0 constipation was mapped to the ICD-11 code DZ2Z, disease of the digestive system unspecified. The correct ICD-11 target code should be MEO5.0, constipation. Discussion. Our results show that method 2 is better in terms of coverage and F1 score, the overall performance. Failure analysis shows that the main source of errors in method 2 is the coverage and accuracy of the WHO map. WHO map goes from the ICD-10 to ICD-11. The first step of converting from ICD-10-CM to ICD-10 is usually quite straightforward and rarely cause any errors. However, the code rollup from ICD-10-CM to ICD-10 process reduced the accuracy and the cost that caused some of the errors. Method 1 is still useful. When we use the union of the two methods, we get a map that has higher coverage and recall than either the method 1 or method 2 used alone. In practice, this can be used to suggest candidate map targets to facilitate manual mapping. And also, if we take the intersection of method 1 and method 2, we will have a map that has higher precision than either method used alone. The intersection map can be used for tasks that require higher precision, like quality assurance of maps from other sources. In our study, the sequential map did help us uncover some of the errors in our reference standard. There are some limitations on this study. The reference standard we used is a very small portion of all ICD-10-CM codes. The failure analysis was carried out by one terminologist and had not been independently operated. The conclusion on this study. The two sequential mapping approaches are useful in automatically creating a draft map from ICD-10-CM to ICD-11 and would reduce manual curation effort in creating the final maps. The different approaches offers different trade-offs among coverage, recall, and precision. That concludes my presentation today. Thank you.